There are 80 questions that are going to be asked of you. Everything's done electronically, and you'll know just minutes after the exam is over whether or not you passed. And if you pass, you can become what's known as a licensed U.S. Customs broker. Right now, there are about maybe 20,000 plus customs brokers in the United States. You can file entries on behalf of the importing public. You can communicate with customs on a regular basis, but you can also be what's known as a compliance officer. Maybe you want to work for a big company and you can advise the people running the company of importing and exporting regulations, and you do training for these companies. So again, in the future, we plan on giving a presentation about brokers. I'd like for you to attend. And right now, I'd like the next slide. Okay, formal entries of goods. Again, gone over this. The magic number is $2,500. If you're bringing goods more than that, you have to have a bond, and that's where your customs broker comes into play, can help you get a bond. Now, there are all kinds of items that can come into the United States without too much aggravation, but some goods do require permits or licenses. And if you're bringing in alcoholic beverages, you have to think of not only U.S. Customs, but you have to think of the Internal Revenue Service, and you have to think about alcohol, tobacco, tax, and trade. And you can go to the website if you want to find out more about alcoholic beverages. When I was with U.S. Customs as an import specialist, I happened to be on the booze team, on the alcohol team. And very interesting. But there's a lot to pay attention to if you're bringing alcohol into the United States. You have to have a permit too for this, and then we have to pay attention to such things as labeling. And when it comes to importing goods into the United States, the number one problem for importers happens to be labeling. They don't get their labels right, marking. Okay, that's a big problem. But you can avoid it by finding out what you need to do before you bring the goods into the U.S. Next slide, please. Okay, what do we have? We also have some other items, sort of what is known as restricted items, and that includes firearms, ammunition, and defense articles. You can go to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms website, and you can find out a lot about that. There are some licensed brokers who specialize in restricted goods, and you can find some brokers who handle firearms. That's what they do. You can also find brokers out there who handle such things as poultry products and vegetables, etc. And that's they handle anything having to do with the Department of Agriculture. You'll find brokers out there who specialize. There are a lot of brokers out there who will take in, or take on all kinds of items, but there are also brokers who specialize. Be very careful if you want to bring in artifacts and cultural property, anything that's trademarked. Right now, the U.S. government is very keen on it, making people adhere to intellectual property rights laws. And if you're bringing in anything that has to do with the country's history, country's past, its cultural property, be aware, because it's not only Customs and Border Protection, but you might be dealing with another agency that's very much in the news these days, and that's ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. You can bring in such things too as biological materials. You can bring in fruits and nuts and medicines, and you can even bring in narcotics. I used to clear narcotic shipments, opium, at JFK Airport. You can bring in things like milk and dairy and cheese products, but you do need permits, and you have to pay attention before you bring the items in. And if you want to know more about these items, go to the FDA website. A lot of information there. Next slide, please. Okay, hunting trophies, fish and wildlife. You have to go to the Fish and Wildlife Service website. I used to be on the northern border. I remember hunters coming back into the United States. They went hunting for bear. I don't know why, but they did, deer, what have you, and they would bring back these animals. But not only at the border, but also at the airports, quite often, I'd have to deal with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We'd have goods coming in that are strictly prohibited. And if you're coming into the United States, don't ever bring in anything made of ivory. That's animal ivory, elephant we're talking about, or whale. There's a lot of things you can't bring in, like tortoise shells, etc. Go to the website, a lot of interesting information there. Petroleum products, the United States is a big importer of, a big exporter right now, petroleum and so on. I used to clear ships coming into New York Harbor, you'd be having to do with oil. Right now it's a lot easier, but pay attention. Anything that you're bringing in is going to have another agency besides Customs looking at it. When it comes to goods coming into the United States, Customs has jurisdiction over all imports. Perhaps the second most important agency when it comes to bringing goods into the United States is the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, because you're talking about drugs, you're talking about food, you're talking about beverages, you're talking about all kinds of things. And CBP and the FDA work very closely together. All right, so if you have any questions, contact your licensed U.S. Customs broker and go to the websites. All right, next slide, please. Oh, and the other thing is contact us because we are providing information, courses when it comes to international trade, and we can be a great resource for you. There are instructors who are actually involved. They're actually, they're not going to spend a lot of time on philosophy. You're going to learn the nuts and bolts, what you really need to know about importing goods into the U.S. If you go to the CBP website, www.cbp.gov, you can get a book, and it's called Importing into the United States, a guide for commercial importers. It has to be updated. Customs needs to do so, but it's a good book. It's free, and it'll cover the importing process, and it'll give you an idea about the issues that are out there, the issues that you need to know about. Also, if you go to the Customs website, you can find something known as trade publications, international trade publications. Go to that link and you can find all kinds of guides, all kinds of booklets with respect to items that you may want to bring into the United States. You may want to find out how the importing process works, whether it's an entry. Customs has a lot of publications available. They're meant for new importers and for importers who also been around for a while. Make use of these publications, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, we went over this formal entries. What do you need a customs bond? Because customs wants to be guaranteed that it's going to get the money that is owed to it if money is owed. Up until recently, a lot of products came in free of duty. There's certain categories, we had certain free trade agreements that were, that allowed goods to come in pretty much free of duty. And when it comes to certain countries, the United States has good relations with them, and we have something called normal trade relations. So we charge certain countries, their goods will come in at certain duty rates, and then the countries that the United States doesn't particularly like, the duty rates are going to be much higher. But no matter what you're bringing in, if you're bringing in goods that are worth more than $2,500, you need a customs bond, and you want what's known as a continuous bond, one that's not going to expire. It'll last all year long. It'll last as long as you pay premiums, and you can again import it within 328 ports of entry. Why does customs want it? Because you may have duties, which are nothing but import taxes, and there might be other fees owed to customs. And not only that, but by having a customs bond, it reminds you, the importer, that you have to pay attention to certain regulations. You can't run afoul, otherwise you'll be an import violator. This is something that you don't want, you don't need, and you don't have to be, because the information is out there how to stay free of trouble. All right, next slide, please. Okay, if you bring goods into the United States, eventually the broker is going to put together something known as a CBP Form 5106. And this is really an internal matter, but it's going to send it to customs. And once it's accepted by CBP, importers are going to have an account with the agency, and you'll be able to import the goods. Now, again, you don't need a license, but again, this is going to be filed on your behalf, 5106. And again, the ID number that customs is going to give you is the employer identification number. It's your tax ID number. Okay, next slide, please. Commercial invoice, very important. Some of you may be familiar with domestic commercial import invoices. Well, when it comes to importing, customs has all kinds of, they're kind of strange regulations with respect to commercial import invoices. Customs doesn't tell the importer what the commercial invoice must look like, but it does tell the commercial importer what must be on the invoice. And you can go to a place, it's in the customs regulations. You can find out about what you have to have on your invoice when you bring goods into the United States. And remember that the commercial invoice is going to be prepared not by you, the importer. It's going to be prepared by somebody overseas. So you, the importer, may have to talk to the party overseas to advise what kind of commercial import invoice you need. All right, and don't ever put down on a commercial invoice no commercial value. That triggers customs, and they say, what? You bring in things that have no value? We don't believe you. And you'll wind up with an examination if you use that term, no commercial value. But getting around the requirements of commercial invoices, you really don't get around them, but you have to adhere to them. And once you know what you have to do, you can stay out of a lot of trouble. Next slide. Okay, there's something called a packing list, and this will help the officers if they decide to look at the goods that are coming into the United States. They're going to have in their possession a packing list. And a packing list is basically an explanation as to where particular items are in an import shipment. It helps them locate an item, and they appreciate having a packing list. So maybe you have a customer here in the United States. The customer is also going to appreciate having a packing list where to find a particular item in an import shipment. Now, a packing list is a lot like an invoice, but it doesn't have dollar values, okay? But it really is just information about the shipment. Next slide, please. Bill of lading. Again, we're offering a course here. You're going to learn about import regulations and documentation and so on, and we'll spend a lot of time on a bill of lading. What it is, well, it's usually pretty boring to read, but it is a legal document and it's issued by a carrier to a shipper. And if you're going to be in the importing business, you have to know what a bill of lading is. You can also use it to sell goods. Okay, you can transfer title, you can do any number of things. And the Ocean Bill of Lading has a lot of information on it. If you turn it over, also all kinds of requirements, conditions on the back of the form, and you need to know about that. There's also a bill of lading for air carriers or for airway, and it's called an airway bill, and that accompanies goods shipped by an international courier, and it allows for tracking, and it's a receipt of goods. It's basically a contract, serves a number of purposes like the Ocean Bill of Lading. There are many different types of ocean bills of lading, but you can find out about this stuff. And where can you go to find out about bills of lading, etc.? Well, you can go to the customs website. You can also go to the websites of some ocean carriers and air carriers. And quite often these companies will have explanations of documents as well. Next slide, please. Other documents, excuse me. You may be required, in addition to providing a commercial invoice, packing list, transportation, such documents known as a country of origin certificate. And you get that from a local chamber of commerce. Basically, it identifies the goods that are being shipped, and many times it lets customs know about the origin of the goods. Origin of the goods are important because depending on what's being brought in, what country, quite often, goods can be being brought in free or at a reduced rate of duty. And free is a good thing. Bringing items free of duty, why not? Okay. So there may be health certificates that have to be issued to you, the importer, to show that the goods are sanitary, that they comply with certain kinds of health regulations. There's all kinds of documents that may be needed, but it all depends on the type of item that you're bringing into the U.S. Next slide, please. Informal entries, we've gone over formal. Yes, sometimes you can bring in what's known as goods that, well, really don't have much value, and it's known as an informal entry. They can be cleared by customs. Their value is less than $2,500. And guess what? You don't need the services of customs broker if you're going to make an informal entry. Why? Because customs isn't going to get too excited about goods that don't have much value. But you still have to have a commercial invoice for them. And quite often what you can do if you're bringing in a shipment for yourself or one that's low commercial value, you can clear it yourself. You can go to the port. You go to something known as the ship's office and you present to the officer the documents that you have and it'll be cleared. Okay, so again, at a later time we'll go over informal entry of goods, but it's a lot less stringent, the entry of goods, than those goods that are worth more than $2,500. Next slide, please. Okay, we have something called Section 321, and a lot of people were very happy about Section 321, even though they never heard the term. You could bring goods in up until recently, and we're talking about August 29, 2025, and they were duty free. The customs officers would not look at boxes, parcels coming in from such places as the People's Republic of China. A lot of the goods coming in, people go online, they order all kinds of stuff. Goods come into the United States, they weren't even being looked at by the customs officers. Well, that has changed. Why? Well, the government says that it is missing out on a collection of duties, and then people quite often put prohibited items in these parcels that were not being looked at, or maybe goods subject to what's known as anti-dumping duties. That's where the government collects a punitive import tax. And basically, it's been done away with since August 29th. And now they're subject to full import requirements. You have to have a commercial invoice, and they're also going to be taxed at regular rate of duty, and that's regardless of value. Now, again, if you're interested in something like this, well, talk to a broker or go on the customs website. You can find out a little bit more about Section 321. I expect it'll be back sometime in the future because too many people are going to be inconvenienced. They're not going to be able to get the things that they want. You're going to find a lot of things missing in stores. They're not going to be on shelves. Tariffs are having an effect on us. They're having an effect on the American public. American public doesn't realize it fully yet, but it's going to cost. And how much of the tariff increase is going to cost the American public? Well, it's estimated, according to Yale University, up to $3,800 a year. That's what it's going to cost the American family. Because again, the costs of these tariffs are going to be pushed back on the consumer. Companies are not going to absorb increased tariffs. Next slide, please. Clearing CBP. You, the importer of record, you're responsible for filing all the entry documents and getting things through the ports of entry. But sometimes you may not want to get the goods cleared by customs right away. You want to defer, or you don't want to pay duties on goods that have come into the United States. And if you don't want to pay right away, you can put a lot of these goods in what's known as a customs bonded warehouse, and they can stay there for up to 5 years' time. You'll use a broker, and you'll make what's known as a warehouse entry. And at a later date, you can pull the things out of the warehouse, and then at that time, you pay duty, taxes, and fees on whatever you brought in. Or you can make use of what's known as a foreign trade zone. In other countries, they're called free trade zones. We have them at the port. And the goods, well, you can do a lot of things with the imported goods that are foreign trade zone. You can manipulate them, you can remanufacture, you can do all kinds of things. And then you can pull them out of the foreign trade zone at a later time. You can enter them into the commerce of the United States, or you can export them. You can send them out of the US. But whether in a foreign trade zone, or if you're exporting them, no duties. And one thing I want to remind you of is when it comes to exports, there's no duty on exports. The US Constitution prohibits that. So your exports cannot be taxed. Next slide, please. Okay, clearing CBP. What do you have to worry about when you're importing goods into the United States? Basically two things. I mean, the two biggies are you have to declare the value of the goods correctly. And it really boils down to this. Value, customs value, is the price paid or payable between the seller and the buyer. That's really it. There are some adjustments that have to be made on occasion, but that's what value is. And then you have to classify the goods correctly. Classification involves the use of something called the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the U.S. It's a great big book. The U.S. version has 99 chapters. Chapter 77 is held in reserve, but the U.S. government says that everything can be classified by using this great big book. And if you printed it out, it'd be about 16.5 pounds. You can get it free online. But if you're really serious about classification, it takes a little time, but again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, and you don't need to know every chapter of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. If you're bringing in a few items, you can be expert on those goods. With regard to classification and what chapters 98 and 99, those are the American chapters. We'll talk about that sometime. But again, pay attention to the value of the goods and know about marking. That's the number one problem for importers, and labeling. The validity of the invoice. Customs has all kinds of requirements for a commercial invoice. You can learn about them and submit a great invoice, all right? One that's not to cause you any grief. And then you have to know whether or not you're bringing goods that are prohibited or what's known as restricted. Restricted goods require permits, basically prior authorization from other agencies. You have to talk to them before you bring the goods in. And then some goods are going to be prohibited. You just can't bring them in, narcotics, etc. You can't bring them in for various reasons. Okay, and then again, customs deals with other government agencies. Customs officers have to think about, in some cases, up to, well, they don't think about it all the time, but they do enforce the laws and regulations of 47 other agencies. So it's a complex agency, and quite often the work is pretty complex, but you can do it. If other people are importing, you can do it as well. And remember, you don't need a license. You don't need one. And if you want to take the broker's examination, well, you can do that. You can sit down. You'll pass if you put the time in. And you can also get a set of credentials, and we'll talk about this in class, through the Customs Brokers Association. You can become a certified export specialist or a certified customs specialist, etc. There are all kinds of things that you can do to increase your knowledge of importing. And one of the best things you can do for yourself is take a couple of courses at NJCU. All right, next slide, please. Okay, clearing CBP. Once CBP has decided that an import shipment, its documentation is in order, the goods are cleared. That is, Customs gives its blessing, and the goods are allowed into the United States. And then the importer is going to have some time. It's going to have 10 working days. He's got to submit estimated duties or estimated taxes, fees, and charges for the shipment to the government. And most times it's done through the licensed U.S. Customs broker, who transmits all this information to Customs electronically. But you, the importer, have to give information that's contained in documents to your customs broker. And then customs is going to look at the goods that come in. It has a file, and it's going to decide whether or not you've declared value and you made the right kind of classification decision. And if customs is happy, well, basically up to 314 days later, it's going to close the file. That's it. The goods are accepted. And the file, again, the entry is what's known as liquidated. That is, the agency closes its entry file and CBP is satisfied. And you want to keep CBP happy. All right? And it can be done. So next slide, please. Seizures and penalties. To those who were not paying attention or just a little negligent. Well, a little bit of negligence can usually just wind up in a warning letter. Maybe you won't get a big fine or what have you. But sometimes people just are clueless as to what they're doing. They don't bother to do any research about what they want to bring into the United States, and they bring the goods in. And sometimes they do so without doing the right kind of homework. And that can be called gross negligence, so basically true carelessness. And again, the party who is found in violation of import laws and regulations can pay up to penalties up to 4 times the duty or 40% of the value of the goods. So there can be penalties for fraud and negligence. Fraud is when you're deliberately trying to fool, you're trying to bamboozle customs, and they don't like that. And customs has a lot of powers, and it can go after people civilly, they can go after people administratively, criminally, etc. So it's like you're dealing with a cop, a prosecutor, and a judge all in one. But you can stay compliant. There are all kinds of ways to do so that weren't possible a couple of decades ago. Customs has done a very good job with its website, and if you know how to navigate, know how to go into that website, take a few courses, you can do well for yourself, all right? And once you set up your business properly, that allows you to pay attention to your clients, the people you are serving, and make money. Next slide, please. Okay, you're not normally going to be penalized for clerical errors or omissions. People are human, they're going to continue to make mistakes. But if your basically negligence is gross or outsized, yeah, customs can go after you. And it could possibly seize the shipment. And seize is a word that customs loves to use. It means arrest, and it can take your shipment, and then sometimes it tries to forfeit. Basically, it tries to own your shipment. That happens rarely, thank goodness. But again, if you're going to be an importer, ask questions before you bring the goods in so you know how the goods are going to be handled and you can avoid all of these nightmare situations. And if you do get into trouble, you make use of a customs lawyer, all right? And that's rarely done, but sometimes may need one. But set up a compliance program. No matter how small you are, set up an import compliance program. It doesn't have to be magnificent. A few pages can do it, but you have to be aware of what's going on. And if there is a violation, you can tell the agency, basic customs is who you're going to be dealing with. You can say, listen, we have an import compliance program, and quite often you just receive a letter saying, pay attention, okay, next time do better. So an import compliance program can help you, and it's necessary. What happens if somebody's out for the day, you have a little company, person sitting at a desk should know what to do. Next slide, please. Okay, how to remain a successful importer? You have to exercise reasonable care. There is a publication you can get entitled Reasonable Care, and it's on the customs website. It's a great publication. It'll make you aware of really pertinent issues, what you have to pay attention to. Make use of the customs website at www.cbp.gov and consult with a licensed broker, customs lawyer, and accountant with international trade experience before importing. And then we also have something here in Jersey City, NJCU, Small Business Development Center. Make use of them. And then again, I encourage you to take classes at NJCU. And I just want to say, in terms of you thinking about what to do in terms of international trade, there are plenty of positions, just a lot out there. You may want to be an import-export coordinator. You can become customs broker, I said, maybe an assistant to customs broker, logistics coordinator. You become a freight forwarder agent. You can become product sourcing agent. You're compliance specialists. People wind up with licenses quite often do compliance work. You can be a warehouse or distribution manager. You can be an in-commerce importer, a procurement specialist. Again, you can become a small business owner. You can start out in your own house. You can start out in an apartment, the importing business. You can start importing small quantities of something. But as long as you do it carefully, chances of you being a great success, great. Okay, so I want to thank you right now for sitting through this presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer your questions. If I don't have the answers right now, I'll get back in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Such an incredibly insightful session. Thank you again. At this time, we want to take a moment to share some exciting opportunities with you. At NJCU, students can begin their journey into international trade early through our non-credit certificate programs, such as freight broker agent training. Martin mentioned a couple of those, certified e-commerce specialists, and others, gaining practical skills and industry-recognized credentials, launching their careers within a few short months. They can then transition into our bachelor's program while engaging in the lucrative careers they've selected. NJCU awards academic credit for prior learning, including select certifications and relevant work experience, helping students accelerate their path to graduation. For more details on our non-credit offerings, simply click the link in the chat. There'll be a link coming up in the chat shortly to access our website and view our offerings and to view our offerings. This fall, we are happy to offer the Import and Export Agent Training course. This course will be held on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, October 6th to November 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. For your convenience, all meetings will be offered online via Zoom. You can use the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat for full program details and to register. We welcome you to enroll today as seats are limited. We're now opening the floor for a Q&A session. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat or utilize the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak, and we will call on you. The floor is open. All right.
Okay, we have any questions out there? I'd be happy to answer, talk to you.
We have a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure, Rhoda, if you can go on. I'm really having problems with the chat here. If you can just give me the questions, I'll answer them. And again, thank you for the questions. Oh, I just want to say one thing before we begin with the questions. I just want to let you know that you don't need a fancy business degree, you don't need a law degree, and you really don't need much or $1 million to start in importing. What you do need is the right knowledge. You can get the right kind of guidance, and if you have a drive to succeed, you can do very well when it comes to importing. Plenty of people do, and you can do it too. If others have done it, you can do it as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martin. The first question we have here is from Wiz T. He asks, do any NJCU courses cover import-export pro forma creation? I don't know, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a good question. There are different types of pro forma. There's a pro forma that has to do with the sale of something, when maybe you're going to be asked to put together a pro forma, and this usually has to do with exporting, and you're going to put together a pro forma or an invoice that looks like an invoice, that basically is an invoice, but somebody overseas needs a writing from you to show a lender that, again, there's a legitimate sale about to take place, and you're giving information about the sale that can possibly take place. That allows the person to borrow money to buy goods here in the United States. There's also another type of pro forma, and it's used in importing. And sometimes an importer may not have the right kind of documentation, may not have a real invoice. And in that case, the customs broker will put together something known as a pro forma invoice. And it just means in the form of. And then the broker will submit that invoice to U.S. Customs, and Customs will say, very nice, we'll be able to clear the goods, but we're going to require you to give us a real invoice or another invoice in so many days. That's usually anywhere from 30 to 50 days, but that's what the broker can do for an importer who lacks the proper kind of invoice. Good question.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martin. We have quite a few questions coming in.
Sure.
Another question from Ensu Kim. Thanks for the presentation. Could you explain the AEU practice in the US CBP?
What practice is it?
The AEU practice in the US CBP.
Again, I need another cup of coffee, but just go over that. The acronym.
The acronym is AEU. And to perhaps you can
Yeah.
AEU. I'm sorry, AEO. I apologize. AEO practice.
Well, it's going to take some time. I mean, what I can do is I can offer. I mean, I have to go on and on about that, but it is going to be covered in class along with a number of other things. I just mentioned, all the things that I see in chat right now that I can't, for whatever reason, get back into. They're going to be covered, and it's something that I'd like to address at a later date, right now. But there's a lot of information out there, and I can't sometimes sum up things in a minute or two because I'd be doing disservice, and I'm sure I'd trip over my words, and I wouldn't give you a full presentation. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Tayo give you my email address, and I will give you a full explanation. Okay, I'll send that to you by way of email.
Awesome. Yes, we'll be posting Martin's email address
Yeah.
shortly. A next question is from Wiz T. Can you provide information on the different courses offered at NJCU and how to access their curriculum? I can take that question, Martin. Wiz T, if you look in the chat, we provided the link to our website. You can also scan the QR code that's located on the screen, and you'll be able to access our website and view the courses that we offer within the industry. Thank you so much for that question.
Oh, sure. I just want to say too, if you take the course, you're going to receive all kinds of materials. If you're in the importing side of the street, I have a book for you. Exporting, the same. You're going to have handouts. We're going to work with real forms, forms that you need to know inside out, whether you're in importing or exporting. Okay, so the emphasis is on practicality, on nuts and bolts. And then I have some books I can recommend to you. They're cheap, and some of them are even in a dummy series. And there's a lot on other websites. You can get an education, and by going to a number of places and downloading, and there's a lot of information out there. It's just knowing about it. Okay, so
Thank you so
that
much,
answers your
Martin.
question, sure.
Pima Dalma Gurung asks, can I do trade as an international student?
As an international student, you're going to have to watch it because you're on a visa right now, and you know how the United States government feels about students, particularly those on F visas. The short answer is no. They don't want you working. Okay? So a lot of people do get themselves, when they're on F visas, even on a B1 and a B2, you can get into trouble that way. So what I would do is, you can touch base with NJCU. They may have an immigration attorney that you can speak to, or if you have one already, speak to them, but don't engage in any business without getting the proper kind of advice before you do so. Maybe possible, maybe there's something you can do, but again, my feeling is you got to be careful, very careful with this. You don't want to get hurt.
Thank you, Martin. As regards to taking this particular course, you can take it as an international student. It's available to anyone all across the world, really. As long as they can access Zoom, they're able to take this course. Thank you so much for that question. Devante Charles asks, what are the most common specializations such as semiconductors and so on?
Just repeat that question, Tayo. I'm sorry. What is?
Devante asked, what are the most common specializations such as semiconductors and so on?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, again, I have a background too with the Department of Defense. I was a special agent. I used to get involved in security investigations as a broker, a customs officer. We have a lot going on in terms of chips right now. And the Department of Defense needs a lot of chips, and some of them are not manufactured here. I recently returned from Taiwan. There's a lot of chip making going on over there. But if you're importing them, you have to pay attention. So there are some carve outs for companies here that have reached certain agreements with the government. They can import the chips. But again, it's something that if you're thinking about them, get yourself what's known as a binding ruling, and that's pursuant to Part 177 of the Customs Regulations. The Customs Customs and Border Protection will answer your questions about chips before you bring them in, but I just want you to know, very complicated, okay? So make sure you get the right advice before you bring those goods in. Okay, and again, classification is also very important, and you have to do due diligence when it comes to buying from overseas. You have to make sure you're dealing with a party that, well, it's not a party that's held in high regard by the U.S. right now, the U.S. government. So again, if you have more about this, if you want to learn more, send me an email, a little bit more specificity, and I'll be very happy to send you what I know about it.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Martin. Wisty asks another question. What key roles are essential for a core importer team?
Excuse me, what was that again? But
What key roles are essential for a core importer team?
what you have to do is you have to make sure that, again, you understand the basics, that you have a bond in place if you're going to be a commercial importer, and that you understand that the bond, it's a Customs Form 301. There are certain obligations, and you should turn over the form and go through the form and find out what your obligations are as an importer. The other thing I can suggest to you, go to the Customs website, www.cbp.gov, and download an international trade publication, international compliance publication entitled Reasonable Care. And you have to be cognizant of a lot of issues out there that can trip you up. And these days, one of the big issues, one of the big concerns happens to be intellectual property rights. You can, just because you can buy something overseas doesn't mean that you can necessarily bring it into the United States trouble free. The example I always give in class is somebody buys a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt. Now, they may have bought the Mickey Mouse sweatshirt legitimately, but it's got an image that's owned by the Disney Corporation. And when the importer tries to bring that sweatshirt into the United States, the importer may be contacted by customs and say, sorry, it's not coming in yet, not until you have an agreement with the Disney Corporation, because you're not allowed to bring that image in without their okay, without their authorization or approval. So there are all kinds of things that you got to pay attention to, but I think a good place to start is with the Reasonable Care publication that's available at www.cbp.gov.
All right. Andrew Grasso asks, where do you go for advice getting started with importing? What kind of resources are available specifically?
Well, I think one to do is, you have to, yeah, among other things, again, if you're going to set up a business, it can be done, and it can be done out of a house, it can be done out of an apartment. Perhaps the most important person to you, a prospective importer, is an accountant. Okay, lawyers, secondly. But if you want to find out a little bit more about getting set for, getting ready for importing, I can suggest a book that you can buy, and it's an import. It's a dummies book. It's called Import/Export for Dummies, and the author's last name is Capella, Capela. And you can buy it used online, but it's not going to cost you more than, say, 12 or 20 bucks. It's well worth it. They give you all kinds of insight as to what's required if you're going to be importing or exporting. You'll be given all kinds of websites to go to. There are all kinds of forms available. I think it's a great book, and it's something that you should go through before you attempt to import or export. And again, if you have questions, please get a hold of me. I'd be very happy to talk to you.
Thank you again, Martin. Another question from Wiz T. Do you also cover in class how to perform due diligence on foreign companies? Wiz
Sure.
T, if you look on the link, if you look in the chat, there's a link that points you towards our website and the course specifically so that you get to see all the topics that are going to be covered in the course. Martin?
Yeah, it's very important for every company to do due diligence. When it comes to exporting, if you're dealing with people overseas, well, again, exporting in many ways is a lot like importing, but once you export something, it's pretty final. You can get into a lot of trouble if you export an item to the wrong location, to a wrong party. And there are lists that the governments have. They're called bad guy lists. That's what they're commonly known as. But you can get a hold of them. I suggest if you're exporting, you go to the BIS, Bureau of Industry and Security, and that's www.bis.doc.gov. And you can find out about the consolidated screening list. There are also companies out there that provide software for those who are exporting. You can find out about all these lists, and there's a lot more in terms of lists than the ones I just talked about. You also have to worry about the Office of Foreign Assets Control. If you're importing, there's also software available. But you know that there are certain countries that the United States has had trouble with and we're going to continue to have trouble with. You have to watch it. Pretty obvious. North Korea, Cuba. Everybody thought that the United States would loosen up on Cuba. It hasn't happened. And you have to be very careful. And not only that, do you have to be worried about who's a prospective violator, but you have to find out whether or not you can get paid. Are you gonna extend credit to anybody if you're an importer? Are they gonna extend credit to you? And if you're exporting, should be extending credit to anybody? You have to do due diligence these days. Absolute necessity. You have to find out, you have to determine if there are any red flags. And again, if there are questions involving law or regulations of people on these bad guy lists, you have to contact the agencies involved. You have to resolve before you take any more action. Okay, so again, go to the customs website, go to the BIS website, and that's again Bureau of Industry and Security, www.bis.doc.gov. Okay, next. Again, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Martin. To be good stewards of time, we're going to run through the remaining questions as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Pima Doma also asked, can we get the information later in PDF or the recording so that I can rewind everything? Yes, we will be emailing you shortly after we close out of this session with the recording and the presentation, so you'll have the slides also in your hands. With T asked what is the best way to follow up with you for additional questions. We will have Martin's email posted shortly. Actually, it's on the screen right now, and you can go ahead and shoot him an email. And Martin is, as you can tell, extremely knowledgeable and available to assist you with whatever questions you have. Martin, do you provide advice through the local SBDC at NJCU? Do you partner with the SBDC, Martin?
I have in the past, and I am very pro. I think they have some very good people. The good, again, I encourage you, if you have questions, contact them. You can contact me, contact people at NJCU. The idea is to get as much information, be as open-minded, open to receiving information as possible, and just realize that once you set yourself up properly, once you have a compliance program in place, whether it's importing or exporting, you can concentrate on taking care of clients, making money, and that's important. So take a little time out in the beginning to make sure that you're not engaged in anything that perhaps you shouldn't be. Not saying it's criminal, but just you want to be sure that you're on firm ground and get to know some of the people in these agencies. And you can do so, although today it may be a little difficult with the government shutdown, but there are plenty of places, there are plenty of people to talk to. And another site, again, I can encourage you to go to is the National Customs Brokers Freight Forwarders Association of America. A lot of information on that site. You can help educate yourself, all right? And I'm available to you. If you have questions, get a hold of me.
Awesome. Arifa Ali, thanks you for such an informative and well-organized session. She said there's so much information out there. We just need to know where to look. And you really helped shed light on that. I appreciate the clarity and guidance you provided. Thank you so much for that, for your kind words, Arifa. Cynthia Reyes once says, do you think importing is easier than exporting?
Actually, I do in many ways. Yeah, I do because if you do make mistakes when it comes to importing, they're a little easier to correct than exporting. Exporting really involves what's known as strict liability. But basically, exporting is the flip side of importing. When it comes to classification, the classification will be the same. Basically, when it comes to value, that's the same. A lot of things are going to be familiar to you exporting if you know about importing and vice versa. But realize that once you send something out of the country, it's rather difficult to correct any kind of mistake that's been made. But when it comes to importing, as I mentioned before, the government still offers a lot of help. You can get advice from the government, written advice, so you have a degree of certainty. And that's what businessmen and businesswomen need. You want as much certainty as you can get, and you get something through a binding ruling, and then you can talk to customs brokers and other people in the international trade, including customs lawyers. So it's out there. You don't have to screw up. You can put yourself on firm ground.
Ensu Kim asks, when it comes to using the FTZ, foreign trade zone, is it
Yeah.
more difficult or complex to handle the importing goods?
No, it's not. The customs broker is going to make an entry on your behalf. Instead of making what's known as an O1 entry, that's where the goods go straight into the commerce of the United States, meaning they wind up on a shelf, in a supermarket, or they wind up in a department store. The customs broker will simply have the goods sent to a foreign trade zone or a customs bonded warehouse. And I mentioned before that foreign trade zones, known as free trade zones everywhere else in the world, well, there's a lot that you can do in a foreign trade zone that you can't do in a customs bonded warehouse. So again, when it comes to the FTZ, don't pay duties until you enter the goods into the commerce of the United States, or if you're going to export the goods, you're not going to pay duty on them.
Thank you. Josh Esteban wants to know, as far as overseas imports from the EU, if they
Yeah.
are shipped via EPAL pallets, is it possible to offset these costs if you will need to ship to customers since they need to be heat treated and also replaced?
Well, again, when you're bringing certain goods into the United States, you have to realize that quite often the agencies will not allow you to recondition. At one time, a lot of the agencies, including Customs and the FDA, We're a little bit more liberal. If you brought foods in that were contaminated, maybe they had too much insect residue or something, you would be able to recondition. The thing when it comes to bringing goods into the United States, you have to make sure that they satisfy safety, health regulations beforehand. And when it comes to wood, if you're bringing in wooden pallets, you have to be very careful. Why? Insects. At the port of Newark, every year, Customs, the FDA discover at least a dozen new bugs. And that's where larvae like to be, these pallets. And the pallets have to be heat treated a certain way. A lot of companies now using plastic. But again, when it comes to transporting goods, pay attention to the containers that they come in. The ocean containers, standard units, a 20-footer, 40-footer, you have 53-footers, but the containers themselves must be clean. Just don't accept a container without doing a container examination. You have to make sure there are no holes in the container. You have to look at the floorboards. You have to do an inspection yourself, and that's going to require somebody to have a strong flashlight and have some tools to make sure that everything is okay. And does the container smell? Who used it before you? Most times you're going to get a container that's been washed out, that's been treated properly. But sometimes it happens that you get a container that you shouldn't be using. And then you've got to worry too about the goods overseas. If you're loading a container, where is the container being loaded? And if it's at night and it's out in the open, you have a good chance of bugs and pests and so on entering the container. And it can cause a lot of trouble when the container arrives here in the United States. The doors are open and then it's examined by U.S. authorities, Customs, FDA, and other offices as well. So something you have to pay attention to. Yeah.
Sophie Warner says, thank you for this informative presentation. Dr. Bear, you had mentioned that the number one issue for importers is labeling. What would
Yes.
you say is the number one issue for exporters?
It's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same. It's reversed. A lot of times people here don't understand what's required overseas. You have customs authorities overseas. It's something known as harmonization. Most custom authorities are pretty similar these days. At one time, they were quite dissimilar, but you have harmonization taking place. Now, everybody uses the same classification system. Uniforms look pretty much the same. The procedures are very much alike. But what happens overseas is the same thing that happens here. You have marking. When goods come into the United States, we have something known as the Tariff Act of 1930, and that requires goods to be marked in English, and the goods have to be marked in a conspicuous place, and they got to be marked legibly, and you've got to show in English the country of origin. Our laws make it possible for people to discriminate against products that come in from certain countries. Maybe they don't like a certain country. Well, they don't have to buy. And that's been in effect since at least 1930, the Tariff Act. And when it comes to exporting, the same thing. You have to make sure that your goods conform to the requirements of that country. And you have to talk to the party overseas to make sure that the party that to whom you're exporting, have to make sure that that party knows, his or her own laws and regulations. So you have to talk. And the other thing that you have to pay attention to is Incoterms, international commercial terms. There has to be a meeting of the minds. And just about everybody gets Incoterms wrong. And that's something you're going to learn if you take the course that NJCU is offering, how to use Incoterms correctly, how to stay out of trouble. And it has to do with responsibility. Who's responsible for what during the shipment of, during the transportation of a shipment. So something you need to know.
Paulina Alzadi asks, as a soon-to-be global business graduate, can I take this course next year, or is it only open to current students? I'll take that question. The answer is this course is a non-credit course and it's available to anyone. So anyone can take this course. And it actually doesn't even matter where you are, whether you're in the US or outside, as long as you have access to Zoom, you are able to take this course, and it's a non-credit course. All right.
It's something that employers like. Right now, the emphasis is on taking short-term courses, micro certifications, etc. Employers want to know that you know what's going on. You're not required to have a 4-year degree. In many cases, it's not going to help you. You can study all kinds of things that really aren't pertinent to international trade. But again, the emphasis at NJCU is on the practical, what you do need to know and how to become a success, whether you're an importer or an exporter. So we don't waste time on that, which you don't need. But I can also recommend to you, and NGCU does as instructors, if you want to find out more, it's there. And there are going to be other courses available, and there'll be different presentations, regarding any number of issues involving international importing and exporting.
Absolutely. Cynthia Reyes asks, will the CBP have info regarding import of tobacco products?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting tobacco products. So you have to pay a pension. The Internal Revenue Service also gets involved in that. And when it comes to labeling, it's kind of tricky, very dicey when you're bringing tobacco products into the United States these days. I would, in every case, get a binding ruling. You have to know how the goods are going to be treated by customs and other authorities when they come into the U.S. Yeah, it's tricky. Tobacco is pretty much frowned upon today. I remember a number of years ago working for customs, we had problems with shisha. We had problems with bidi. Those are Indian cigarettes, all kinds of stuff. But customs does pay attention to tobacco. And go to that site. I talked about alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. You're going to be given this slideshow. Go to the website. You can find out a lot of information there. And then also look at the FDA website, www.fda.gov. Yeah,
Wonderful.
and then talk to the customs broker. There are brokers that specialize in that kind of stuff. Again, tobacco's not as popular as it used to be, but always going to be examined. You're going to be looked at by customs officers, I guarantee you.
Thank you, Martin. And Sue Lee asks, thanks for the wonderful presentation. If an NJCU student takes this course as a non-credit course, will it be applied to NJCU's prior learning credit? And the answer to that, Ansu, is that's currently under review. The hope, yes, we're looking to review the course to ensure that it's something that can be also used for prior learning credit. So if you have more questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us and we will connect with the transfer office and confirm the answer to that question. Thank you so much.
Well, one thing I'll tie on, sorry, I'd like to address the audience. When it comes to international trade education, NJCU is one of the few schools out there that engage in this. There used to be a number of schools that would have international trade programs. They're gone. So NJCU is very different from most schools, offering what it does offer in terms of importing and exporting. You really can't get this in many other places in the U.S.
Awesome. Juan Gavadia asks, I'm a small business owner selling clothes and accessories. I already have done a couple of imports with values less than $1,200. Do you think it is a good course for me to have a better understanding of the importing process?
Absolutely, because no matter what you're bringing in, it doesn't really matter the quantity. It will have some effect on your bonding and the entry process. But you have to know about what it is that you bring into the U.S. You have to know whether or not the item you're bringing is subject to the jurisdiction of other agencies as well. And then again, knowing more will provide you with more opportunities. The more you know about importing or exporting, the more you're going to realize there are other avenues. There are other avenues to making more money, to expanding your client base. And again, there's a lot of things, again, that we don't produce in the United States anymore. On the other hand, there's also a lot of things we do produce here that are very much wanted in the rest of the world. So you can do both sides of the street. And the more you know about one side of the street, the better you're going to be on the other side. But there's a lot of opportunity out there.
And to Kim asks, when it comes to using the FTZ, is it more difficult or complex to handle the importing goods?
No, not at all. You're going to give the same information you would for what's known as a consumption entry to your licensed U.S. Customs broker. Remember, we talked about the information on the commercial invoice and the packing list, and you have to give some transportation documents to your broker. Well, that same information is just going to go to what's known as an FTZ entry. And instead of the goods going into a supermarket or a department store, they're going to go into the foreign trade zone. No problem.
Thank you, Martin. Sophie Werner asks, will the import and export agent training course ever be offered on the weekends for those who are unavailable for the evening session?
We're going to talk about that. I realize that life often gets in the way. Yeah, I mean, busy with families, jobs, etc. Sometimes the weekend is the best time. So we're going to talk about that. Right now, it's being offered in the evenings. Again, people have a lot to do during the day. I give anybody who's taking the course a lot of credit for taking it. I mean, many times you come home exhausted. You've got to commute, you got to do all that. So again, I want you to know too that when I present, I want to make it so that it's as stress-free as possible. And you're going to be given assignments. It's a good way to know people, fellow students, what have you. But I emphasize no stress. I'm not here to aggravate people or to, give you memory tests and so on. That's not it. The idea is to have you learn. That's what's really important.
Awesome. We have one final question from Wiz T. How often is this course offered? And the answer to that question is it is offered every term. We have one in the fall, one in the spring, and if we have enough interest, we also run one in the summer. Well, I believe those are all the questions we have. Hold on, something just popped up. Okay, yes. I think we're all good to go. Thank you so much for a wonderful Q&A session, for an engaging Q&A session. And thank you, Martin, for all of your answers to the questions of our audience. Just a
Well,
couple additional points before we log out for today. We truly want to ensure that everyone who has participated in the webinar, that they get the opportunity to go through all the material. So we will be emailing you shortly with the recording as well as the PowerPoint slide so that you can have a closer view of all the information shared. We also have an additional gift for all of our participants today. You'll receive a presentation on our importing and exporting in 2025, opportunities, practicalities, and careers. That'll be included in the email as well. We would like to hear from you. By the way, we want to make sure that all of what we're sharing today and how we're sharing the information is acceptable, is makes sense to you. So please, you'll see I believe a QR code coming up soon with our survey form. Kindly assist in completing that survey form. We'll also send a link in the email of the survey. We truly want to hear from you and find out how we can provide better information for you and what else we can do to enhance your experience as you join us for these events. Once again, sincere thanks to Martin K. Bear, Esquire, for delivering such an informative and engaging session. And thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time, your engagement, and your support. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Tayo, and everybody else at NJCU. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.